20 years of readings, and what I am holding for you right now is unlike anything in those 20 years. I want you to understand what that means before we go a single step further. I am not someone who uses superlatives casually. I have sat with thousands of energies across 2 decades of this work, and I have learned through all of that sitting the specific, unglamorous discipline of saying what is there rather than what sounds impressive, of resisting the pull toward the dramatic when the accurate is sufficient. The accurate today is dramatic. What is assembled around your energy in this specific moment is something I have not encountered in this precise configuration before, not elements I have never seen, but this particular arrangement of them, pointing at this particular person in this particular window of time, producing this particular quality of convergence, unprecedented. Your destiny is being influenced today by 3 people simultaneously, and I am going to name all 3. I want to begin with the word destiny before I name the people, because it is the largest word in this reading, and it deserves to have its weight established before anything else. Destiny is not fate. I want that distinction to be clear, because fate implies inevitability that does not require your participation, something that would happen regardless of what you choose. Destiny is different. Destiny is the specific outcome available to you when your choices align with what you are actually capable of being. When the version of your life that corresponds to your full potential meets the circumstances that allow it to be expressed, destiny can be missed. It can be walked past. It can arrive and be misidentified as something smaller. It can be reached and then not claimed, because claiming it requires a particular quality of readiness or courage or willingness to step into something that exceeds the current version of your self-perception. What is happening today is a convergence of 3 separate influences that, in combination, are creating the specific conditions in which your destiny is not merely available, but is being actively presented to you, is being brought to your door in 3 separate but coordinated forms in a way that makes it considerably more difficult to walk past than it would be on an ordinary day. Today is not an ordinary day. Let me speak to the 3 people, because the title promises them, and the promise deserves its delivery. The first is someone who carries something you need, not something you want, something you need. The specific distinction between these 2 things is important. What you want exists in your awareness. You have language for it. You have thought about it and reached toward it and understood it as a desire you carry. What you need is sometimes less visible than what you want, because it operates in the territory of what would actually produce the specific result you are reaching toward, whether you have correctly identified that mechanism or not. This person carries the thing you need. They may be delivering it directly in the form of information or an opportunity or a door they are about to open, or they may be delivering it indirectly as a catalyst, as someone whose presence in your day to day creates a condition that produces something you did not specifically request, but that you will recognize immediately as exactly what was required. Watch for the person who shows up in your day today with something that initially seems peripheral, but that lands in a way that feels more significant than peripheral. That is the first. That is the first. I want to give you something more specific about how to recognize this person when they arrive, because watch for them is the instruction, but it helps to know what to watch for. They will not arrive announcing their relevance. The first person does not arrive saying, I have something you need, or presenting themselves in a frame that immediately signals this is significant. They arrive in the ordinary way that people arrive in a day, in a context that makes sense on its surface, with an interaction that begins at a register that does not obviously contain what it actually contains. It is only when something they say or offer or do lands in a particular way, when something about the interaction produces a response in you that is disproportionate to its apparent surface, that the significance reveals itself. That disproportionate response is the signal. The moment when something that seemed like a small thing lands with the weight of something larger, when a piece of information or an invitation or a seemingly casual observation opens something in you that was not open before the interaction, that is the first person arriving in ordinary wrapping. The second person carries something for you. The distinction from the first is in the direction of the carrying. The first carries something you need and will deliver it. The second is carrying something about you, something they have been holding that belongs to the space between you and them rather than to either of you individually. A decision, a revelation, a shift in how they understand something that has directly involved you. This is someone whose perception of you or whose relationship to something that matters to you has recently changed, not on the surface, in the specific interior, not yet expressed way that changes often operate before they become visible in behavior, where the shift has occurred but the expression of it has not yet arrived in the form that reaches you. Today it arrives. What they are carrying about you is something that, when it enters the space between you, changes what is available, what is possible, what the landscape of a particular situation looks like when the new information they carry is added to the picture that previously existed without it. Significant. The third person is the most extraordinary of the three, and the reason for the superlative I opened this reading with. The third person is someone you have not considered as someone who would have influence over this particular area of your life. That is the specific, unusual 20 years, and I have not seen this configuration quality of what is assembled around you today. Not simply that three people are influencing your destiny simultaneously, that one of them is someone you would not have predicted for this role. Someone whose connection to the specific territory of your life that is being influenced by this reading is not obvious. Who exists in a context or a relationship with you that is not the context or relationship that the relevant area of your life would suggest. They are a surprise vector. The person whose influence arrives through a channel you were not monitoring because the channel did not appear to be relevant. It is relevant. It has been relevant in ways you could not have tracked from your position because the relevant mechanism was not visible from inside the situation. It is visible now. And when the influence of this third person lands today, when what they do or say or decide or communicate produces its effect in your life, the surprise of its source is going to be one of the most significant pieces of information available to you, because the surprise tells you something about the reach of your situation that you did not know your situation had. I want to speak to the specific quality of today as a day, because the title names today and the naming of a specific day in a reading carries weight that needs to be honored rather than softened. Today is a convergence point, not manufactured, not produced by anything you specifically did today or will specifically do, by the alignment of circumstances that have been developing through their own separate processes at their own separate paces, and that have, through the natural mathematics of things developing at their own paces, arrived at the same point simultaneously. three separate threads, three separate people with three separate relationships to your life and to the specific situation this reading is about, all arriving at the same moment. This is the configuration I have not encountered in this form in 20 years. Not three influences on a person's life. The specificity of the three arriving together and the three producing in combination, something that none of them would have produced alone. The specific emergent quality of a convergence in which the whole exceeds the sum of its parts. What the three of them together create is not three times the influence of one. It is something qualitatively different from any individual influence. It is the environment in which destiny becomes not just available but undeniable, because the surprise tells you something about the reach of your situation that you did not know your situation had. I want to describe the third person one more time with more specificity because I want to make sure the image is clear enough to be useful. This is someone who would not be on a list you might make of people likely to influence the area of your life this reading is about. Not someone you would think of as a player in the situation, possibly someone you have not thought about in relation to this at all. Someone whose relevance to the specific territory being affected has not been visible to you because the connection between their position and your situation is not a direct one. The connection is indirect. They influence you through what they influence, through a second order effect, through something they do that affects something else that affects you, through a conversation they have with someone else that produces a shift in that person, that produces a shift in your situation. The chain of influence is longer than one step, which is why you could not have tracked it from your position. But the end of the chain lands on you today. And when it lands, its source will be either invisible or surprising, depending on whether you are paying the quality of attention I described earlier. Let me speak to what you need to do today. Because a reading that describes three people influencing your destiny without providing any practical guidance about how to navigate the day in which this is happening would be incomplete. Pay attention. That is the complete instruction. Not complicated by specific things to look for or specific situations to engineer or any of the deliberate strategic behaviors that people sometimes adopt when they understand that a significant day is happening. Simply pay attention at a quality of presence that is fuller than your ordinary day might require, that is receptive to what arrives through channels you were not expecting it to arrive through. That is curious rather than defensive about surprises. That does not immediately organize unexpected things into familiar categories, but allows them to be what they actually are before the categorization has reduced them to something more manageable. The third person, the surprise vector, requires this quality of attention specifically. Because if you are operating on the assumption that the relevant influence today will arrive through the channels you have already identified as relevant, you will miss the person arriving through the channel you had not identified. Be open to the wrong direction. Tell me in the comments at the end of today what arrived, not during the day, because I want you present in your day rather than in your phone, but at the end of it, tell me which of the three you recognized. Tell me if the third person surprised you. Tell me how the convergence felt from inside it. I want to know. I want to speak to what the combination of the three influences produces, because I named the unprecedented quality of this configuration, and I owe you the content of what makes it unprecedented. It produces clarity, not the ordinary, gradually emerging clarity of someone who is working through a question and arriving at an answer through the slow, organic process of continued engagement with the question. The specific, sudden, all-at-once clarity that arrives when several pieces of information that have been separate and therefore insufficient on their own are simultaneously available. The clarity of a picture becoming complete. You have had access to some of the pieces for a while, some information about the situation. This reading is in the context of some understanding of the people involved, some perception of what is happening and what might happen and what the relevant variables are. But the picture has been incomplete. Today, the three people bring the missing pieces, not metaphorically, as actual, specific, real world information or shifts or decisions or communications that fill in the gaps that have been keeping the picture from resolving into something you can fully see and therefore fully respond to. And when a picture that has been incomplete suddenly completes, what happens is not a gradual recognition. It is a specific, almost physical experience of understanding something that you have been looking at without fully seeing, of the visual equivalent of a click, an almost audible reorganization of what you knew into what you now see clearly. That click is coming today in three parts, from three directions. That click is coming today in three parts, from three directions. I want to describe what happens in the body when the click arrives, because it is not only a cognitive experience, and I think naming the physical quality of it will help you recognize it when it lands rather than moving through it too quickly to register what is happening. It produces a stillness, not relaxation, the specific, slightly electric stillness of someone who is in the middle of understanding something, who has just received a piece of information or a shift in perspective that is reorganizing what they knew into something larger and more complete than what they had before. The particular quality of a system that has paused its ordinary operation to process something that exceeds the bandwidth of normal processing. You might stop mid-task. You might feel the need for a moment before you respond to whatever is in front of you. Not because you are overwhelmed, but because the update requires a moment to install before the rest of the operating system can continue functioning in its new configuration. Give yourself that moment. Do not rush the processing. The moment of the click arriving is one of the more significant experiences in this reading's arc, and it deserves to be fully inhabited rather than move through so quickly that its significance is reduced to a vague sense. Something shifted. Something is shifting. Let yourself feel it fully. Let me speak to what comes after the clarity, because clarity is not an end point. It is a beginning point. What it produces is the condition of correct decision making, the specific, informed, nothing essential missing state of someone who can choose what comes next with full access to what the situation actually is. You have not had that access until today. Not because information was deliberately withheld, because information was not yet available. Because the three people whose influence is converging today had not yet arrived at the points in their own processes that produce the things they are bringing to you now. Because the right moment for the full picture to be available was today rather than any prior moment. Timing is not random. The full picture arrives when the person it is arriving for is ready to receive it, and when the people bringing it are ready to bring it. Those two readinesses have to align, and they have aligned today in you and in the three of them simultaneously. That alignment is the unprecedented thing. I want to speak to one more quality of today before we close. This day, after it is finished, will look different in your memory than it does while you are inside it. Significant days often have this quality. They are not dramatic from the inside. They do not announce themselves with fanfare or produce the specific heightened quality of atmosphere that would make them obviously different from ordinary days while they are happening. They look, in the moment, like a series of ordinary events, like a day in which things happened but in which nothing seemed particularly extraordinary. And then later, looking back, the pattern becomes visible. The three people and their separate arrivals and what each of them brought and how the combination of all three produced the specific, complete picture that was not available before today. How what seemed like a phone call or a conversation or an unexpected encounter or a piece of information delivered through an unremarkable channel was actually a piece of something larger that only the retrospective view can see all at once. You are living today from the inside. The full picture of what today is will be more visible from the outside later. Trust what arrives even when you cannot yet see the full shape of what it is part of. It is part of something larger than the day. 20 years, Virgo. And nothing like this. Step into your day. All three of them are already in motion.